Well, welcome to the Beyond Cinema studio presented by Celebs.com up here at TIFF. Cruston, Justin McMillan, Christopher Nelius. Firstly, congratulations for being up here with this film, Storm Surfers 3D. What I loved about it straight away and made someone I was watching the film with nauseous was the 3D element of this story, putting you right in the water. When was that an option? Like, when was that decided that that's how you guys wanted to do it, put the viewer in that spot?
I guess we've done a couple of these before in 2D, and about 2 years ago we were given an opportunity to shoot in 3D. Someone said, what about doing it in 3D? And it was it's a no-brainer really, isn't it? Like, the idea of watching big wave surfing in 3D is like, anyone would want to go and see that. And we were kind of dumb enough to say yes, so we just jumped in and said, yep, let's do it.
Do you have to be a little bit crazy to be making these movies in the first place? Because even though we see Ross Clarke-Jones on screen, we see Tom Carroll on screen in these huge waves, you guys can't be too far away with the cameras.
No, we're always, I think it's kind of one of those things where it's one of those projects where you need to lead by example. You can't expect people to go and do your dirty work and sit in a really safe director's chair from afar. We're always kind of, running out of the way of giant waves and yeah, basically, as I said, rolling up sleeves and getting your hands dirty. I don't think anyone really respects you in the film industry unless you are going to put your money where your mouth is, kind of thing, and that's what we do.
So where did these relationships start with Ross and Tom? I mean, obviously Tommy, for a lot of people who grew up in the 80s, was the consummate professional. Yeah. I mean, he was the big wave surfer of the 80s, the golden curly hair and all that sort of stuff.
For both of us, like, I mean, I know I had posters of both these guys on my wall when I was in high school, and there was all these constant arguments about who was better at different waves, as you do when you're a teenager. But for us to sort of start working with them when we kind of got a little bit older, there was that element of, for me anyway, I was pretty sort of starstruck when I first met them both. But it's the same as any relationship. As soon as you start to kind of break it down, you realise that these guys have strengths and weaknesses just the same as any of us. And I think it was when we did Ross Clarke-Jones' life story a while ago, and that's kind of where the whole relationship really sort of was forged in steel back then, yeah.
But, I mean, that was, what, 2006-ish, right?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
So what did you, like, I mean, because his kind of a, anti-establishment kind of character is known as much for his nightclub partying as he is for his surf. But, so how did you even get to meet him? Did you meet him out one night and it all fell out from there? Or like, what was that? Or did you approach him?
It was actually, the way that we actually met him was, it was through a legitimate pitch that he'd put out for his life story in Red Bull. And it was basically, it went out to directors across the board as to, who's willing to come and direct my life story. And the pitch was submitted, and, we were kind of lucky enough to win. And it all started from there. But it definitely, it wasn't anything favors-wise or anything like that. Like, we actually kind of won a legitimate pitch, so it was good. It was good that the relationship started professional, because there's been so many moments where the relationship hasn't been professional, and yeah, it was nice to kind of have that sort of right there from the start. There's a mutual respect there. He kind of trusts us implicitly with what we do, and we kind of protect those two as individuals, their own individual brands, as it were, and they're kind of happy that the projects that we make with them that are honest enough to sort of portray them correctly.
Like you said, like, you've done a couple of these before. There was Storm Surfers New Zealand, and then and they were made for TV specifically, right? So when did this become something bigger, or was it just you saw the product and you started getting it out there and people said, we've got to see this on the big screen?
We knew as soon as we had the opportunity to film in 3D that it was going to be a 3D project, that it had to be a feature film. Like, you couldn't go that far and not try and put it on a big screen. We had no idea whether it was actually going to work or not. So that was quite stressful for us. But we knew we wanted to get a feature treatment, and there's definitely things that we've been able to do in this film, even aside from the 3D, in terms of narrative and creativity and being a little less prosaic and more poetic, and the feature film format gives you that chance to do that. And we were lucky as well that because we're close to Ross and Tom and we've got that access to them, that we could draw more out of them than you would get in a TV show. And it gets a lot more personal, and we like to think that when you watch the film you feel like you have gotten the real Ross and the real Tom.
Yeah, and I mean, you couldn't be luckier in terms of one seems like a Zen Master and the other one's just a crazy monkey.
Yeah. And they're like the perfect natural example of a buddy movie. And none of that's manufactured. You've got two guys who light each other's fire. It's like a chemical reaction when they get together, but they're also quite different individuals. And then they also have this 20-year relationship, deep relationship that goes back as well. And there's so many moments when we're hanging out with them or filming them that you go like, this is just what you were like when you were 20, isn't it? You haven't changed at all. You've got kids and a house and stuff, but you still just act like you're 20 years old on the Pro Tour.
But that's the thing about Tom Carroll, is that it's very obvious that his whole attitude towards surf has changed. And do you think that's just strictly a case that maybe his family is now perhaps more important to him than his surfing?
I just think it's part of the reality of life and getting older, and the idea of responsibility, but at the same time not giving up the things that make you that give you fun and that make you feel alive as a human. And I think his story in particular, and Ross, they're both really shining examples of don't ever lose your inner child. Don't lose that sense of fun out of your life. You don't have to. You don't have to do that.
Is it ever too cold for him?
No. I think both of those guys have a really similar sense of kind of adventure and spirit, and not wanting to be the guy that didn't participate. And that's what was interesting this year. Like if it was back in 1940s, they'd be the first guys to sign on the dotted line to go and fight overseas or whatever. Like they wouldn't miss out. But I think with Tom, especially this year, like they're aware of the repercussions a little bit more than they used to. Like, for example, Ross smoked cigarettes since he was 16 years old and literally gave up last year because it's the first time in his life he got held down for almost 2 waves, and he was gasping, and he was like, "Oh, I've never gasped before." And I was like, "Mate, you smoke and you're a big wave surfer." And Tom's like, "Oh, like the last time I got injured, I was on the couch for 3 months and I nearly went insane." So they're kind of doing it to just avoid those situations again. He wants to avoid being on the couch recovering. Ross obviously doesn't want to drown anymore, so he gave up smoking.
Yeah,
so
drowning's a bad option.
not a good option when you're a big wave surfer.
We had Stacey Peralta come in the studio back in January, and obviously his films and Step Into Liquid and all this, Riding Giants and all these films that have become classics on the US side of things are just amazing, and would be amazing in 3D too. Is there any talk between the Aussies and the Americans to do something together and go after some?
Oh, we'd love to. I mean, we're talking about setting up for Cortez Bank and having that done really, really well in 3D, because I think you've obviously got the best filmmakers in the world in California. You've got the biggest wave in the world just off California. So there's a lot of ingredients there, and I'm sure Chris and I love to collaborate on anything like that.
And how did you feel after the play the other night up here in Tiff?
I was stoked. I was pretty happy. It was our first international paying audience. Like, it's easy in your own country to get slapped on the back by people because they saw how hard you worked, whereas here no one really cares. So for them still to like it and say nice things about it was really cool.
Very cool.
I think especially the sense of humour, like it's that thing when you're from Australia that, you know, guys like Steve Irwin and Paul Hogan have, you know, kind of like broken the ground in a place like the US especially and around the world, but there's still that nervousness about, like, oh, are they going to really get, because Ross and Tom are hilarious, they're like real life cartoons,
Right.
and that's really who they are, and I was a little nervous about whether people would get that humour straight away, but it felt like they did.
Yeah, especially because Aussies know who they are. They know that they're going to relate to them anyway. They've been relating to them for years. And here they are being introduced to a whole new audience. So congratulations and thanks for coming in and spending a few minutes with us.
Cheers, Elliot.
Thanks.
Cheers. Ta.